When we think about political power, we usually picture a single decisive action, a person walking into a booth, marking a choice, and dropping a paper ballot into a dark slot. Back in the 1950s, the newly minted field of political sociology viewed the world exactly this way. Research was focused squarely on the individual voter at the ballot box. Scholars embraced an extensive behavioral approach, running opinion polls on thousands of voters to trace how income, family background, or social networks dictated a single person's final choice on election day. This focus on individual behavior birthed the era's dominant theoretical framework, championed by scholars like Robert Dahl: pluralism. Pluralists argued that American democracy was an inherently level playing field. In their view, wealth did not translate automatically into influence, and no single elite faction could permanently dominate the system. Instead, they believed that countless different interest groups constantly competed within the government, naturally checking and balancing one another, so no single voice overpowered the rest. But this perfectly balanced, individualistic worldview had a glaring blind spot. If every citizen actually had equal access to the ear of politicians, then the wide-scale anger brewing underneath the surface of the country made no sense. A society where power is shared equally among all individuals does not suddenly tear itself apart. By the 1960s, that neat theoretical equilibrium fractured as broad social upheaval spilled out of the textbooks and into reality. On college campuses, protests like the free speech movement at Berkeley revealed a kind of collective friction that individual voting surveys couldn't explain. Meanwhile, the civil rights movement proved that marginalized Americans didn't simply enjoy a level playing field, they had to organize to demand access to it. Sociologists were forced to ask an uncomfortable question. If everyone could supposedly participate through the ballot box, why were millions of people taking to the streets to decry systemic injustice? To answer this, the field zoomed out from the individual to the meso-level. Scholars began studying the mechanics of collective action, researching how social movements recruit members, build ongoing networks, and deploy strategies against authorities. By the 1970s, it became clear that protest tactics were only part of the story. To understand why certain groups remained locked out of the system for generations, researchers realized they had to examine the deep history of American labor and the way the economy itself was built. This focus on structural exclusion brought macro-level economic theories back to the center of the field. American sociologists began re-engaging with the work of Karl Marx to explain how modern inequality was baked into the clash of social classes. Political power was no longer seen as a series of isolated choices made by individual voters. It was an ongoing struggle between large-scale social and economic classes. Just as the field settled into viewing politics as a perpetual fight between these social classes, another major shift hit in the 1980s. Until this point, the government was largely treated as a static container, a neutral arena where different economic interests and social classes fought to achieve dominance. Theda Skocpol challenged this view, arguing that the state itself functions as a powerful, independent actor, possessing its own weight and momentum. Government officials and bureaucrats maintain their own unique goals and vulnerabilities. This allows them to wield power in ways that can actively clash with the interests of the wealthy elite. This overarching machinery of the government shapes society just as much as society shapes the government. This brings us to the modern era of the field, often called institutionalism, the study of how enduring political institutions and social forces continuously mold each other. It is a discipline defined by healthy debates. Scholars still argue over whether historical outcomes are driven more by the independent actions of the state or by underlying class struggles. You can see this play out when researchers try to untangle the origins of the American welfare state. Are policies like old age pensions the result of institutional maneuvering in Washington, or were they forced into existence by citizens demanding economic justice? Ironically, by focusing so heavily on the state and its institutions, modern political sociology can sometimes look indistinguishable from political science. But there is a crucial dividing line. Political science tends to focus tightly on the mechanics of the law, the electoral systems, and the politicians themselves. Political sociology zooms out. It is the study of the social classes, the historical inequalities, and the collective human movements that built the very stage those politicians are standing on.